I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is David Chesney, White Rock, BC City Councillor and editor of the White Rock Sun. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you very much, Jim. Nice to be back with you today.
Real estate prices in the Vancouver area have just gone nuts over the past year. The latest survey showing that sales have gone up over 27% year to year, and the average price now is $1.43 million, and that price is up 23% in a year. White Rock any different than any other community in the greater Vancouver area?
No, I think given the beautiful topography and the geographic layout of White Rock, we're probably on the high end of land value increases here in White Rock. It shows no sign of slowing down. We still have a pretty big inventory of little old beachside cottages and that on the hillside. I was riding the bus the other day, coming back up from the waterfront and one of our main east-west corridors along Victoria Avenue. Just sort of glancing out the bus window and doing a head count of how many little old cottages are still here. There's quite an inventory of them, and actually I'm seeing houses that were built as recently as the late 70s, 80s. You look at them and just, they're beautiful homes, but they basically are knocking them down and building these monster homes that, are probably worth up to $3 million on that hillside.
What is that doing to the flavor of the communities? Are the people who live there happy about it?
Well, I don't know that there's, we've talked about this before. We have a large seniors population in White Rock. It's always been a retirement community. I don't know that that's the main thing that's happening now. A lot of the big new condos that are being built, I think, are being priced to take advantage of people that are now into their golden years and don't want to maintain a house, but they want to have a good-sized condominium, 12, 14, 1,600 square feet. They do not want to move into a 950 square foot, one bedroom, one bath type of a residence. So the whole landscape is changing in White Rock, but I don't think that that's unusual for anybody. People that are here that have their properties are looking at their assessments and going like, wow, I bought this house in, 1994. And it's now appreciated in value, at least on paper, by $400,000 or $500,000. Maybe I should sell. But then they look around and they're challenged with, well, unless I'm willing to quit my job and move to Williams Lake, what am I going to buy with the money that I do receive from selling my home? You have to go well out past Mission towards Chilliwack to even see any kind of a drop in house prices. I was just talking to a performer, Stephen Fearing, that was here at Blue Frog Studios on the weekend, and he recently moved to Victoria because he couldn't afford to live anywhere in Vancouver. But he said the Victoria market is heating up. He's bought himself a fixer-upper, and he's watching the price just, climbing almost on a weekly basis. So it's not, once the lower mainland, is completely eaten up, there's still a fair amount of land here, obviously, but I don't know. I guess if I could predict accurately exactly what was going to be happening, I'd be selling real estate instead of talking to you today.
Well, a year ago, the IMF said our real estate was overvalued by 30 to 40%. What would they say today?
Well, you could probably put it at least 50%.
And of course, people warn whenever you have a hot market like this, it's the precursor of a giant bubble burst. But Vancouver, it seems to me, when we do have downturns in the real estate market, it might drop 10 or 12%, but within a year it's recovered that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think anybody's really got a real strong handle on exactly what's going to happen. I mean, we've talked about the shadow flipping and, the real estate board investigating itself and making sure that we're not laundering a bunch of dirty money. Where's this money coming from? I mean, there's all kinds of safeguards that they may now be putting in place, but at the end of the day, that's a huge economic driver. If 70%, which is the figure that I've heard from a number of professionals, if 70% of the Lower Mainland real estate transactions in the last 5 years have been to offshore Asian investors, take that out of the equation. If the government was to clamp down, if Canada Revenue started having a real close look at where this money is coming from, these people are going to start to park their money elsewhere. Now, you can't possibly by any stretch of the imagination equate that 70% of those transactions were with ill-begotten wealth. But the fact is that's a tremendous economic generator, and it's almost like our natural resource. Alberta has oil. We have real estate.
Well, real estate is worth a whole lot more than the oil patch is to the Canadian economy. I forget the exact figure, but it's absolutely staggering. It's in the trillions. And it is one of the big drivers of the Canadian economy. And even when prices fall, you're still exchanging huge amounts of money, between individuals. That's got to mean something to somebody somewhere. Yeah.
But again, I'm sure Toronto is seeing huge booms in their real estate market. But, the point is that there is a lot of land in this great country of ours, but they're not interested. The foreign investors are not interested in moving to Weyburn, Saskatchewan, or Medicine Hat, or Moose Jaw, for that matter. I'm sure that some of these markets are seeing a bit of an upturn, but nothing. It's astronomical what's happening here. I mean, everybody has horror stories. Not a day goes by that we don't see something in the news about a house that was put on the market and sold at $500,000 over and above what the asking price was.
And of course, people wonder, is there any end to it? And first-time home buyers are the ones who actually drive the real estate market. They've been driven out of Vancouver itself. And, Vancouver is very much facing a labor shortage because people who work there can't afford to live there.
Yeah.
And of course, we have the lowest minimum wage in Canada except for maybe New Brunswick, but the cost of living in New Brunswick is nowhere what it is in the Lower Mainland. Again,
all I can say is I certainly wouldn't profess to have the answer. It's a very complex matter, and obviously the market will be driven by the demand, and the demand is there. Is it tapering off? Well, according to what you just quoted, no. If anything, it's continuing to climb.
David, what were people talking about at the community conversation you held last Saturday at the White Rock Library?
Well, it was a bit of a raucous one. We dealt with a number of topics. The trees, the denuding of the hump, which we've talked about here, the piece of geography between East and West Beach and White Rock that was clear-cut and has left a terrible eyesore. The city has still not put together a comprehensive plan of what they're going to do, how they're going to develop it. There's now a big rumor around town that there's going to be they're going to bring back the 2007 concept of another parkade. I don't support that. I've not seen any concrete backroom dealings regarding this matter, and I would never ever support it. I think we have more than sufficient parking in White Rock. Certainly, on those glorious sunny days, and we've had a couple of them lately, where parking is at a premium. But to spend millions of dollars for more parkades that 75-85% of the year are going to be empty, I don't see the rationale in that, to be very honest. But that's a very hot button. But I think what has really happened here is, the clear cutting of the hump in sections has been going on for at least a decade here in White Rock. But, I sort of thought that this was going to kind of have its day in the sun, shall I say, and back off the back burner. But if anything, it's continuing to getting hotter and hotter and hotter. But I think it's being now held up as an icon of what a lot of people in White Rock, or a number of people in White Rock, think is a big problem in our community. The way it was handled, nobody seemed to have a plan. It was voted on, and I've mentioned this, I believe, in a previous community conversation. I did support it, but what I supported was something that was referred to as vegetation control. Call it a rookie mistake. I live, I learn. I was shocked and horrified when the vegetation control turned into an absolute clear cut. But I think that it's now become a rallying point. It's become a symbol of everything that people feel is wrong with the city of White Rock. So it's not going to go away by any stretch of the imagination, and it's going to continue to be a hot button here in town. Again, more and more trees are coming down. You buy a little beach cottage and you want to put a monster house on that hillside. Well, there's a couple of trees that may have to go. There was a nice little yard with a little cottage there, but no room for that tree anymore. So the city is trying to deal with a tree bylaw and a tree policy, and it's basically a mess. It's a mess when it comes to the trees. So that's probably the big hot item that was talked about. Again, it doesn't seem to show any sign of abating as far as being a point of contention with a lot of people in the community.
Does White Rock have rules about how big a tree can be before you can just cut it down? I know in many municipalities like Burnaby, if it's something over, say, 8 inches thick, you have to get a permit to bring it down.
Yep, we do have those in place, but again...
But I hear the chainsaws running away all over the place in my community, and big trees are coming down, and I don't know if they had permits or not. How do you know?
Well, one only needs to check with City Hall, but I mean, that becomes almost a full-time job for a watchdog to be trying to keep an eye on that. People will alert me now and then that they think something is going on, and I'll check with City Hall, and, the simple facts are you can't say to somebody, well, look, you bought this lot, and all you can build on it is a little beach cottage, because you can't take those trees down. So you're right. If they're of certain size, they need to go to the City Hall and get a permit to have those trees removed. But it doesn't appear that that's a big problem if you prove to the planning department, I can't build on this lot with these trees still here. I just simply don't have the footprint for my design. You have to plant a certain number of trees, but nothing that's going to grow up and eventually impact your view or your neighbor's views. So it's basically the tree bylaw becomes a bush bylaw.
Well, I call it the Jackie Cohen syndrome. If you remember, Jackie, the owner of the Army and Navy stores, cut down a number of large trees to improve her view. She's fined $250,000. Well, of course, in the Vancouver area, $250,000 won't even buy you a doghouse. So, it's just the price of a good view.
Well, and you're right. That's happening here. If you're spending $2, $3, $4, $5 million for your property to develop a beautiful big home, it's the cost of doing business. And nobody's being hit with those kind of fines out here. It might be $10, $20, or $30, or $40,000 for illegally taking down some trees. But it's funny you should mention that Jackie Cohen situation, because I was living on the endowment lands at the time, and when I heard that it had happened, I rode my bicycle over there and stood on one side of the street and looked at all the trees that were down. I mean, there was a massive amount of big Douglas firs that came down, and then turned around and looked across the street and thought, okay, well, who would benefit by this? And there was Jackie Cohen's mother's home, and it was only obvious. And this is why, there was a charge. It was so blatant. It was so blatant who would have paid for this. That's the only reason that Jackie Cohen was ever busted for this.
But, unless you go and add prison time on top of those fines to these rich people, it doesn't matter.
I don't know what the answer is. I don't think you can start putting people in prison for cutting down a tree.
So obviously the penalty isn't enough to stop it.
No, it isn't. It's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
You factor it in and, you go, all right, so, and I mean, the view was increased immensely to the Cohen piece of property.
And increased the value of that property.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't think it was done to increase the value. I think it was strictly done to increase the view, because it opened up a complete channel straight out view corridor right up Howe Sound. It's spectacular.
And then, of course, I remember the poisoning of the trees on Beach Avenue in Vancouver, right on the waterfront as well, in the West End.
Yeah.
And, they found this lady was putting bleach into the trees. And amazingly, the arborists in Vancouver were able to save several of those trees, but you saw these poor things struggling. And every summer, too, when we get a drought, and that seems to be the pattern now for the greater Vancouver area, folks, please go out and water the trees. You know, your lawn can come back. Those big boys can't.
Well, we have a similar situation here in our corridor of our uptown section of White Rock, right along Johnson Road, sort of the gateway into the community. A number of years back, some trees were planted there, but they were planted improperly in that, you know, when they dug the hole, and I've seen examples of it simply across 16th Avenue in South Surrey, they've done exactly the same tree. Now, their trees are not quite as big as ours yet, but when you put the hole down before you plant the tree, you put metal sheeting down on all four sides, maybe 6 to 8 feet down, put the tree in, fill it up with dirt, and then the roots have to go down 6 to 8 feet past the metal and then branch out. So what you end up with is still you're able to maintain, you know, totally flat sidewalks and have beautiful trees. Well, we don't have that luxury now, and there's, you know, some of these big, beautiful trees, the vast majority of them are now buckling the sidewalks. And it's a bit of it's more than a bit of a problem, especially with our large number of seniors in the community. You know, you have to really watch, you know, your P's and Q's as you're walking down the street, because it's very easy to catch your toe and, you know, down you go. And, you know, certainly if a person is in their latter years of life, a fall like that on cement can cause some pretty serious damages. So, trees is, you know, all aspects of trees here in White Rock, and again, I think in most areas. I just sent something over to City Hall. I just saw from a website that I subscribe to, Healthy Communities, all the top 8 or 10 cities in all of California, their main streets that won awards, every single one of them had beautiful big trees lining down along the side of their sidewalks on both sides in their main sections. So it can be done, and it should be done. If you drive around Vancouver now, and I certainly noticed this recently down around Canada Place in that particular area, when you drive along at street level, the city has planted a tremendous amount of trees, which, having spent, you know, the last 50 years driving around Vancouver, is very refreshing to see. So everything at kind of at eye level, yes, we've got, you know, towers and high-rise apartments and everything above us, but the streetscapes, it seems to me that they've put a tremendous effort into the greening of those streetscapes. So I applaud Vancouver for that, and I think other communities, and I hope we here in White Rock can take a page out of that book.
Well, Vancouver on the weekend was selling trees to people. You could get 3 trees for $30.
Yeah, I saw that.
And studies have shown one urban tree is worth 12 in the forest when it comes to shade, oxygen, all those things.
Yeah.
We'll have more with David Chesney right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Unbelievable harmony, spectacular performance, the ultimate tribute to the Everly Brothers and Simon & Garfunkel. Bird Dog and the Vintage Electric Band coming to Mission, White Rock, West Vancouver. Buy online and save at ontourtickets.com.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with David Chesney. David, what else came up at the community conversation on Saturday?
You know, it's just a lot of little small niggling things, which are the main reason for having the community conversation. Sure, we can discuss the bigger issues, and my fellow councillor, Helen Fathers, the only other council member that joins into the community conversation, and I have an opportunity to hear some very small things that we kind of just look at and make notes and go, well, you know what? This should be a fairly easy problem to solve. We'll get into it, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can on this. So those are the very positive things that come out of this, and those are the things I think, you know, in addition to still trying to figure out a way to engage the community a little bit more and make them a little bit more vocal and feel that bring your good ideas. As I've said before, these were never designed to be just a bitch fest or yell at a councillor fest. We get a little bit of that. And again, I understand where that comes from. People are terribly frustrated, but it's not just in White Rock. You look across the border, the reason that we've got such a polar opposites in the U.S. election is people are mad. They're incredibly mad. They're enraged, and when you have a candidate like Donald Trump, you're pouring gas on the fire. And I think it's only going to get worse, the division down there in America between the haves and the have-nots and we could see race wars again. I mean, I'm really now starting to get very concerned about what's happening just across the border. I look out my window and I can see America. It's right there. Now, granted, the furthest you can get from the seat of power in America is Washington State, and in particular the northwest corner of it. So it's a pretty quiet area. Washington State has never really been one that's really been on fire, but it's starting to cause a little bit of concern because I do see that people are getting incredibly mad and terribly frustrated, and they want change, and they want it now.
And of course, whenever you have immediate change, that upsets a lot of stuff.
Well, that certainly does. Sometimes, it's not thought through. It's not, discussed and researched enough. It can be a knee-jerk reaction, and I think we all can be guilty of that kind of movement, and that's not a very healthy place to find yourself.
Well, Donald Trump, compared to Barack Obama, one is the president, the other one acts like a spoiled 5-year-old.
Yeah, well, I try not to pay a lot of attention to the Trump thing, but it's pretty hard not to. But the Bernie Sanders race for the head of the Democrats is the one. I mean, to me, it seems to me that there's a lot of backroom deals going on there. That the Democrats really, really want Hillary Clinton as their candidate. So I don't know. I think there's been some backroom dealings to kind of try to freeze Bernie out. I'm surprised. Again, it shows you how polar opposite things are. I mean, Mr. Sanders is basically what we would call a socialist. Yet America, a large portion, he just was at Safeco Field last weekend and drew a massive crowd. Thousands weren't even able to get into Safeco Field to hear him talk. So, but the media is not covering him anywhere like they're covering Hillary, and certainly the Democrats don't get the play that the Republicans did, or do. So, again, we've talked about when you put the media into the hands of a select few that are beholden to you, it's pretty easy to control it.
Well, that's exactly the state in both Canada and the U.S. Just 2 or 3 companies run all the media.
Yeah.
And, of course, they want favors.
Certainly they do.
David, anybody else holding community conversations like White Rock is, or you are?
Well, unfortunately, the one other one that I was aware of, I was unable to, with the passing of Rob Ford. I had been trying to reach him for the last 6 months or so, having read a fascinating book. And then if anybody really wants to have sort of an inside look at the soft underbelly of politics, just let me see if I can, I can't really pull it up right now, but it was, I can't remember I think it was called Uncontrollable. So the fellow that was heading up the election campaign for Rob Ford when he ran for mayor, basically revealed sort of a real, backroom look at how and why Rob Ford was elected. Well, one of the things that I noticed after reading the book is that Rob had been and continued to hold these things called community consultations. And I thought, well, that's rather synchronistic. Good, bad, or indifferent. You can say what you want about Rob Ford, but I thought I'd really like to talk to the man and find out how he stages his community consultations. Given the size of Toronto, what he did was he moved them around to the various boroughs and would promote that this Saturday I'll be in Kitsilano. A month from now, I'll be in the Point Grey district or Yaletown or wherever. And I thought, well, given the size of his community, it would be necessary for him to move that around. make a long story short, we just were not able to connect. About the time that I tried to get a hold of him, he had very quietly gone back into the hospital. He'd been ill in the hospital for quite a few months before the media picked up on it, but I'd been dealing with his secretary, and she said, Bob has seen your inquiry, and he would very much like to talk to you, but given the fact that right now he's sort of in for the fight of his life, we're going to have to wait till he gets better. Unfortunately, he didn't. But to the best of my knowledge, that's the only one. I wouldn't be a bit surprised. Langley just had a young fellow elected, Nathan Pakal. There was a by-election there. One of the council members passed, so they had to have a by-election. And this young fellow, I think he's in his early 30s, who has a blog called South of the Fraser that he's been running for a number of years. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised. We've had a bit of conversations back and forth. He's expressed interest to find out more about the community conversations. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised. But to answer your question, those are the only two. The only one that I know that's happening for sure was the Rob Ford ones, which obviously are no longer happening. But no, I don't see any others sort of stepping up at this point.
Well, I know nationally Rob Ford was viewed as a buffoon and idiot. Of course, it turns out to be alcohol and drug addiction. After he went to rehab, he seemed to be a very reasonable man, and I could see why for 3 days people filed by his casket, because if he was holding these conversations, he touched a lot of Torontonians personally.
Well, that was the thing that was brought out in the book. I think one of the Kodak moments and I'll try to quickly quote this from the book, is that this handler, when he was first starting to work with Rob, they'd be driving to all candidates meetings, and he'd be trying to give Rob the hot button issues of, this particular borough that we're going into. Transit's a big issue, or this is a big issue, or housing for the homeless, or whatever it was. And Rob kind of just brushed him aside and said, yeah, it's all very well and fine, buddy. He said, but he said, you just watch me. He said, I just go up there and let it fly. And which he did night after night, and people found him very endearing, and the response was huge and immediate. But as they would be driving away from the events, Rob would have these yellow foolscap legal pads that he'd be going through, and he'd be picking up the pad, sitting in the front seat of the truck, and he'd start making these phone calls as they were driving from one to the other, and the typical call would be something like, hello, Jim, Rob Ford returning your call. What can I do for you? Yeah. Oh, you got a problem with a pothole out front of your house? Well, that doesn't seem to be a big problem. Why don't I come by on House Thursday morning for you? I'll bring by one of the city engineers and we'll get this problem solved. He kept meticulous notes of the addresses, the phone numbers of all of these people that he had helped. And when they got back to the office, he finished one of the yellow pads and happened to throw it into a legal box. And this handler said, how many pads do you think are in that box? And Ford turned around and looked, and he said, oh, I don't know. There's probably 100 of them. He said, is that all of the pads there? Ford said, no, I've kept these. He said, out at the Deco factory that the family owns, we got a warehouse in the back corner. We've just been filling these boxes and putting them back there. Well, the handler couldn't believe his good fortune. He went out, got all of the boxes, had all the names, addresses, phone numbers. I don't know that there was emails, but basically created a database, and people started pounding the phones and phoning up and saying, hello, Jim, I'm calling on behalf of Rob Ford. We note here that he had called you back in April to help fix that pothole in front of your house. Everything good with that? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I'll tell you what, we certainly hope that you can support Rob in his run for mayor. Well, the night of the election, they all sat down at the matriarch's home, Mrs. Ford, and as the handler said, he thought we had a slim chance. It had grown over the election. Within 20 minutes, they announced that the election was over and Rob Ford had been declared the mayor of Toronto. And that is exactly how he did it. Because all those years that he was a councillor, he talked to these people. He also kept a pocket full of fridge magnets with his name, his phone number, and which was a private phone number in his home that his wife meticulously took all the messages. Sometimes if Rob was near the phone and was in the mood, he would actually answer the phone. So there was a great quote from one of the eulogies at his funeral service, and I think it might have been the mayor of Toronto, whoever's the mayor now, said, ladies and gentlemen, there will never be another politician ever as loved by the people of Toronto as Rob Ford. And that's why he would have these huge rallies, and his public, people would go, you know what, okay, Rob came off the rails. We all know that. I'm not going to debate that for a moment. But when somebody has touched your life and helped you find your lost dog or fixed that pothole or got the burnt street lamp out front of your house fixed after 6 months of trying, you go, you know what? That's the guy that I want to send back to City Hall.
David, thank you very much for chatting with us.
Jim, it's always a pleasure. Sorry if I ran on a little bit, but, you never have to spend a lot of time digging information out of me.
No time limits on this show.
Excellent. Talk to you next month.
My guest has been David Chesney, White Rock, BC City Councillor and editor of the White Rock Sun. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions or comments about the show can be sent to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.